So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rex Bacarra. He has 2 PhDs. Wow. A PhD in philosophy at the La Salle University in Manila, and also a PhD in management research at King's College London in the UK. He is currently a full-time faculty at Rabdan Academy, teaching ethical standards. He specializes in global leadership, culture and ethics, strategic human resource, organizational behavior, among others. He is McGraw-Hill's Education's digital faculty consultant for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And he also taught at Curtin University, Dubai, both for the BBA and MBA cohorts. So please join me to welcome Dr. Rex Bacarra.
I heard rumblings of stomachs. Did you know that 90% of what's transmitted in our brain is visual? And people usually remember 80% of what they've seen and just 20% of what they've read. The visuals are processed 60,000 times faster in our brain than text, and that around 40% of our nerve fibers are basically linked to the retina. Why am I telling you this? I am telling you this precisely because the human beings, us, we process visuals faster and more efficiently than text. If you look at the image behind me, it takes around 13 milliseconds for you to process the image to my right, more than, of course, the text. But the question here is, why are educators bad at visuals? Well, I have to add, generally bad. I don't want you to be throwing your bottled water and cell phones at me. So I will repeat, and I'll paraphrase my question. Why are educators generally bad at PowerPoint presentation? To be very specific about it. Okay. You know, I asked my students once, what are the characteristics that you don't like about your professor's PowerPoint slides, or the visuals, the materials for that matter? And they said, too many words in a slide, no graphs, overly used and clip art. You also have no movements, no animations, templates with too many words and too many animations at the same time, all text, unreadable even, and bad color scheme and bad color combinations. And then I asked them again, what are the things that you like most about your professor's PowerPoint presentations? And they said, well, graphs, pictures that increase understanding of the content, bulleted points or bullet points that basically help them in organizing ideas and verbal explanations with pictures and graphics that are more effective when you are explaining and discussing ideas to and with them. And then I asked them for the last time, why do you like visual presentations that are well-designed? And they told me, doctor, because visually designed slides are engaging. And here is one bit that they shared with me, and they said that, you know, doctor, we noticed that professors who leave no details behind are generally excellent professors, and we want to be like them, professors who are excellent in everything that they do. I want to repeat that one last bit. They noticed that professors who leave no details behind are generally excellent professors. And they want to be like them because they inspire them. Professors who are excellent in everything that they do. You know, I've always thought of education as not just a transmission of knowledge from one person to another. It is not just the passing on of information from the teacher to the student. But education is primarily education of character. It's going to be education of character. You know, I noticed also that excellent educators are examples, excellent examples. Excellent educators are the ones that give examples to the students. And I noticed also that excellent educators are the ones who come up with fantastic slides. And of course, you'll probably say, but doctor, we have so many works. And it is just a slide. What is important is the content. But we're talking here of excellence. Because following that, to follow through, here is another one that is shared with me, continuity. There should be no dissonance and there should be no disconnect between the university and the industry. I have heard this many times from the alumni, and they would tell me that, Doctor, whatever it is that what we learned from the university is not necessarily what the industry practices. And of course, there are many ways to interpret this. It probably because of the outdated frameworks. It might be because of the old-fashioned theories. But it can also be because our students are finding it hard to have an example, at least excellent examples on how to present. The industry compels them to communicate powerfully and to come up with stunning visuals when they are presenting ideas, when they are selling products and services, or when they just want to be different from the competing others. And this is what my topic is all about. Stunning visuals to the power of branding, elevating classroom engagement in the industry standard tools and techniques. Now, I'm not saying that the tips, the guidelines, or the experiences that I got from the industry are going to be applicable to you in all cases. But probably for many of you, this can be certain insights that you may use in your learning engagement in the classroom. So here are the topics that I'll be discussing rather briefly, precisely because I know that some of you are hungry. So we'll have this. Just something. I know that my topic is about stunning visuals, and my previous PowerPoint slides are comma-inducing, okay? And they are boring slides. Let me calibrate my slide. What's my password? I'm just kidding. There's no password. This is a slide. This is a slide. Okay, we can do it like this. Okay, this is a PowerPoint presentation. Of course, I'm using Mac, so I'm using Keynote, but I also know how to do it in PowerPoint presentation. Okay, and this is my topic, and here are basically the subtopics that I'm going to discuss today. So, communicate through color palette. You also have people that they scan, they don't necessarily read. There are some of the subtopics. Communicate your identity consistently. Another topic, communicate through customer emotions using the brand type and how I use that in the classroom. And at the same time, perception through color branding. Another one is the YIDA formula being used in the industry, branding through shapes. And you also have branding through lifestyle creation. And of course, here's more. Okay, communicating in threes. Branding is about other people, and the onlyness statement, and of course the last one is the power of perception. I've always thought that teaching is acting. It has nothing to do with my emotions. I may be sad before I enter the classroom, but my sadness has nothing to do with educating the young. I need to act. In fact, since they've shared the life story, the reason why I'm very passionate with teaching, especially classroom engagement, is because I've always thought that education for students is the best thing for students, not necessarily for me. It's the right thing to do. I want excellence because it's the right thing to do, not for any other reasons. And the other reason, of course, is going to be that I came from a very poor family, and some of my colleagues here, they know about my life story. I came from a very poor family. Came from, of course, the Philippines, but an island in the Philippines. And then I graduated at 19. I went to Manila. It's a city in the Philippines. And then I thought that I'd be able to find a job. And then I realized because of my accent at that time, and probably because the way I was dressed up at that time, I couldn't really pass the interviews. For 5 years, I became homeless. 5 years. I was sleeping in the streets. I was showering in the public gyms. And I was not begging, by the way, but I became a waiter, I became a street sweeper, and many others, which I will not be sharing with you at this time. But for 5 years. And then something happened to my life. I got adopted. And then I realized that when I started teaching the children of that family in exchange of being adopted, I realized that my passion is in teaching. And then I became a monk. For some reason, I became very, very religious. I became a monk. I went to the mountain. I applied in a monastery when I was 24. I became a monk until I decided to leave the monastery 14 years ago when I came to Dubai. Okay, when I came to Dubai. When I was in the monastery, because we were on top of the mountain, we have farmers and sons of farmers. For some reason, I started teaching them the basics of ABC, mathematics, for example, the simple ones. And then it came to me, I have a gift for and of teaching. And then the Abbot, the superior, said, hey, you are not for the monastery. You need to go to Manila, you will be a scholar, and then pursue your first PhD. That was my first PhD then. And that's it. And then supposedly when you're in a monastery, you will die there. But then I was young when I entered, so I said, there must be something about the outside life. 14 years ago, I came to Dubai. I didn't want to stay in the Philippines because when you are in the monastery and you leave the monastery in the Philippines, it becomes a huge scandal. So I said, I better go to another country. So I went. I came to Dubai. And that was the first time that I have money. First time. Because when you're in the monastery, you don't have money. You're not given money. You're not salaried. Then I came. I was happy with a 6,000 salary. I'm single. I was, still am. I'm happy with 6,000. Okay? So I started teaching and became loyal to the college. And then eventually I shifted. I went to other universities as a young. And finally, I am at Zayed Military University. Last year, I was recruited by the government of Abu Dhabi to teach the future military leaders of the UAE. Now, you may be asking, why are you so focused on the visuals? Because I realized in the classroom that it helps in terms of engaging the students. In my feedback, okay, written and oral feedback, this is always mentioned. My visuals are different from the other faculty members. And it also helps in my branding, to be honest about it. And at the same time, it's not just about my branding, but also because that they are engaged because of my visuals. Not just the content, but because of what they see. And this is precisely because of my visuals, the guidelines, the tips, the strategies, they come from the industries. I've analyzed them and incorporated them in my classroom. First one, communicate through color palette. All my visuals, 60%, you know the primary colors, secondary colors of the accent, 60%, very basic. Let's start with the basic. 60% primary, 30% secondary, and of course the 10% is going to be accent. If you have accent of 60%, this happens. You change it, and you have this. Of course, this is a website, but it's the same with PowerPoint presentation. It's the same with the visual materials that you have being distributed to and with your students. People, especially in the age of social media, they don't necessarily read, especially the young ones. They scan. And there is a pattern with the scanning. It's going to be F. From right to left and down again, going to the left again, and basically follows the F pattern. When I'm designing my slides, I follow this. Okay, precisely because these are the common and the fluid movements of the eyes. And as I mentioned, people don't necessarily notice that you have spelled the words incorrectly. But we are in academic institutions. We're supposed to spell words correctly. Okay? But this is also a good point coming from the industry. Some of the ads of the industry following the F pattern. Okay? I'm loving it. Even if I am presenting to you some examples, just take a look on in terms of how my slides move. And I would like to think you're very engaged, and probably you're asking, how did you do it? It's just PowerPoint presentation. Some workshops. I'll give you some workshops sometime, not now. And then belief statement, positioning, communicate your identity consistently. When I'm giving workshops for universities, I usually make sure that they understand the spirit of the university or the institution. So that even the covers, the colors, the fonts are going to be used in the classroom because that is part of the brand identity of the institution itself. Example, Coke Zero. Okay? For those who are into marketing, especially those who are in the industry, why do you think the colors black, red, and white are the colors of Coke Zero? By the way, there's already Diet Cola, Diet Coke. Generally unsweetened. This is unsweetened. Why is it that the Coca-Cola came up with two unsweetened diet beverages? Yes. Fantastic, that is correct. Have you even noticed that or studied that? They realized that the men aren't buying Diet Cola because it's too feminine. Of course, there is a bias to that, a cognitive bias to it. And that is why they introduced this, a more masculine version of Diet Cola. Now, you're probably asking me, but where did they get that idea that black, red, and white would actually appeal to men? And by the way, many of my PowerPoint presentations at the Zayed Military University, generally the colors are this. Because my students, they're all from, eventually they will become captains and generals in the Army, in the Air Force, Land Army, Navy, among others. They're all men. Okay? And that is why I'm using these types of colors. I'm probably going to ask, how did you know that these are the colors that are going to be appealing to them? I'll explain that in a while. Here, you will have all this. Of course, this is going to be industry standard, Coca-Cola Zero, even the fonts, even the colors are being studied by Coca-Cola, okay, and even the branding. And if you notice here, it says that this is an archetype, if you look at there, okay, personality and character, and basically it's about optimism, it's about creativity, it's about risk, and this is the brand identity system, black, bold, confident, contour, dynamic, and then it's about ambition as well. Now, if you look into this, this is where Coca-Cola got the idea of which colors to choose, which fonts to choose, and even the kind of branding that best suits this Coca-Cola, this type of beverage. These are known as the archetypal model in visual design thinking. This is also my basis when I am designing my PowerPoint slides and visuals in my classroom because it appeals to the kind of students that I have. Archetypal, okay? You know, if you're familiar with John Locke, the philosopher John Locke mentioned that our mind is a tabula rasa. It's a blank tablet. And anything that's imprinted in our mind that becomes knowledge comes from the experience. Carl Jung mentioned, no, you're wrong. In 1919, he came up with this list of the archetypes. Archetypes are primal desires of human beings. That is the reason why your heart beats faster when people talk about freedom. That is the reason why your heart beats faster when you hear somebody talk about beauty. Okay? And of course, many other archetypal types. My point here is these are human desires. And the desire, each one is unique to every individual. But in the industry, what happened is that they came up with a study about if you have a group of people wherein this product is intended, what type of archetype is best suited? I ask the same question to my students, at least when I'm dealing with my students. What archetype usually, okay, in terms of my students at ZMU, remember again that these are all men. Okay, what kind of archetype? But this is also applicable to your students. I realize in my study that it's going to be the seeker. Okay? But I'll look into that a little later. Okay, for Coca-Cola, the archetype explorer, okay, it's about freedom. And then, if you notice, it's not just Coca-Cola, but North Face, Jeep, Patagonia, and many other companies are using this archetype. Colors, fonts, movements, fluidity of motion they all came from this particular archetype. These are just examples. Disney uses another archetype. If you notice, something to do with magic, there's something to do with mysticism. The brand is basically power, and it can happen as the message of the brand. So if you look at the website of Disney, all of their images are basically colorful. Again, the reason for that is all of this knowledge comes from the archetype. And there is a list to this. What is the magician's archetype that they are using? It's mystical, informed, reassuring. And then the magician's personality, it basically strives to make dreams come true through somewhat mystical ways. Transformation, believing in imagination, believing in the power of dreams, intended for families, intended for... It's already time, okay? And so we have Disney, Coca-Cola, Dyson, who use this archetype of magic. They know their audience. I know my audience as a professor as well. Again, I did this using PowerPoint presentation. Remember that. And in the advertisement of Disney, you will also have even the music, the bravura of the music, okay, the type of colors, the Pantone, okay, purple. Purple is the color of royalty, okay, the color of magic. So they are also used in their ads, in their materials, in their visual materials for that matter. Even the characters of Disney, Mulan, Pocahontas, they are studied, and all of this came from the archetype. The archetype is the foundation and the basis coming from the industry on how they would introduce the product and how this product is going to be appealing to the consumers and the clients. This is the same suggestion, if I may say, guideline that I used in dealing with my students, making sure that they get engaged in my classroom, precisely because it's not just about the communications, but it's also about relatedness, that they're able to empathize through the use of visuals. Even, for example, another example would be from the pharmaceutical industries. Do you notice that almost all pharmaceutical industries, they use the color blue, and there is a reason for that. And even the shapes, the imageries. They always use the same shapes. Shapes have meanings, again, according to the study of the industry. The circle conveys community, unity, friendliness, depending on my activity in the class. For example, if I have an activity about teamwork, precisely because I'm teaching these kinds of students, many of my images related to the particular activity would be circular. See, that's how I use them. I'm giving you subtle hints precisely because this is not a workshop, but you will have the idea. And of course, other meanings. All of the other companies and institutions, the shapes have meaning depending on their charisma and depending on their goals. Yellow, joy, adventurous for brown, you have being nurturing, and of course, many interpretations of the colors. I know, I still have 2 minutes. And then the use of colors, marvels, among others, the use, of course, of love, passion, courage, strength. And of course, if you notice all of these companies, blue colors, because that is going to be how they want to be identified with the meanings connected to the archetype. Look at these companies again. They want nature, growth, harmony. They want to be identified with such characteristics. Thus, they use the color and, of course, the shapes and images as well. I will give this kind of the 12 archetypes to the admin, and probably if you're interested, then you can always get it from them. Okay? Communicate in threes. This is from the industry. As much as possible in my PowerPoint presentations, in my materials, I wanted to have brevity. Because I noticed that in the industry, it's brief. The communication is brief. Maybe it's Maybelline, Just Do It, Toyota, Let's Go Places, I'm loving it. Okay? Again, this is branding. Amazon, Adidas, FedEx, Federal Express, they realized that, hey, why not make it catchy? Follow the archetype, make it FedEx. Okay? 2 syllables. And then, of course, create a story. Okay? I was telling you about the student's archetype. And the student archetype is about exploration, self-discovery. And this is also applicable not just to my students, but also your students, because they are at that stage. They wanted to develop, they want to explore others, they want to explore themselves and their place in the world. It's all about exploration. And the colors in this particular archetype of the seeker or the explorer, you have the blue, green, and the yellow, and of course with the meanings according to the study of the archetype. Shapes and symbols that are appealing to the students, university students, would be circles and spirals, again because of their intended meaning. Now, strategies for engagement based on the archetype: encourage exploration. Ask critical questions. Allow them to answer your questions without biases and without judgment. Usually, based on the study of the archetype, when I enter in the classroom during the first day, I would tell them that this is a safe place. This is a safe space. You can argue. You can say all the things that you want in my class, whether you perceive that to be offensive or not, okay? And you're not going to be judged, because this is how knowledge grows. Remember that the explorer's archetype, the seeker, is all about growth. And I love what he said about reflection, 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 because this archetype is also about reflection. And then, telling a story. If you notice McDonald's and many other products, when they have an advertisement, they're not really related to the product itself. The most effective way is to tell the story. And how do I apply this to engage my students? I tell stories. Right? I notice that stories are powerful. There are 3 ways to effectively open a speech. One is to ask a question that matters to the audience. The second one is to come up with a factoid that shocks the audience. And the third one, the most effective way to open and to engage the audience, is to tell a story. Do you remember when you were younger? And then when your mother or your father or grandmother or grandfather starts telling you with once upon a time, and then you lean, and then you are anticipating what he's about to say, or what she's about to say? That is the power of storytelling. And storytelling, I notice in my experience, is very effective in the classroom. These are just examples. Apologies for the person at the back because I know that you're signaling me. I don't want to go into that. They're only in a statement, but again, this is made using the PowerPoint presentation. Branding, coming from the industry as well, based on perception. If you notice all the labels of all the products in the market, coming from the companies, the first thing that they do is to play on colors, making sure that they are of good combination. And the other one, the next one is going to be, what is it? Brand name, product category. And the third one is about, why should I care? This one, why should I care, struck me as a teacher. Because I'm teaching philosophy. And in my experience, when I have students who are in business, why would they care about philosophy? See? And I would always tell them why philosophy is very important to their lives. Okay? Why should they care? And if you tell that why your subject, why your course is important to the students, make them understand how relevant their course to their life, then they engage more because they understand it. I will just swipe it, okay? And then Apple probably understood the archetype of the archetypes. Remember this very famous and iconic advertisement of Apple. Okay? This is the archetype of the rebel. At that time, Apple was just about coming in, inroading. We need to make sure that our brand is known to the people. And they have the biggest competitor at that time, IBM, Microsoft, among others. And then Apple came in. So they were using the rebel archetype. Eventually they became known. What happened was that they used what is known as the creator archetype. See, there was a shift, there was a change. Okay? All of these products, from being the rebel, now becoming the creator archetype. You know, I've always thought of my students as there's a change of archetype the moment that they entered my classroom until the end of the semester. When they enter my classroom, the very first meeting, the very first time, I've always considered them as seekers of knowledge. But I have to make sure that my classes, my topics change, and the approach of education and learning in the classroom will change after the midterm. Because at that time, I'm going to shift to the creator archetype. My students, from now on, you will create something, you will innovate something. You will be taught on how to become analytical, how to become critical, and create. See, it's a transformation. Education is a journey, and the journey of the student is the beginning of which is that when they enter my class up to the end of that semester, because some of them probably I will not see. But if you ask me, how do you know it's effective? Feedback. Feedback. I never had bad feedback since I started teaching. Never. That I can say with all humility. That I can say. I will end this with saying that, you know, I'm very passionate with my profession because the only gift that I have. And I know that I don't want this gift to go to waste. And this is the gift of teaching. I am already teaching. And since I'm already here, I need to be excellent in my teaching for the sake of my students. And that is why I'm always reminded by Coach Lombardi's quote, and I always say this at the end of the talk. Pursue perfection as educators. Pursue perfection. Of course, it's impossible to attain perfection. But when you pursue perfection, according to Lombardi, in the end, even if you don't attain it, you will attain excellence. Thank you.
for the Q&A.
Questions?
Thank you very much, Rex. This is definitely out of the world for me. I mean, I really care about visuals. I put a lot of effort in my presentation slides for my students as well, but this is definitely nothing that even close to my 100% effort. So my question here is that, I mean, I talked to a lot of my colleagues as well. I mean, most of them, either they do not have the skill to do this, or they do not know how to do that, and they do not have time to do it.
No excuses. No excuses. Look, I'm also a professor like you. I'm a teacher. I have to research. I have to teach. And remember that my mission is to become excellent, at least, okay, and make sure that my gift grows. Okay? I'm Aristotelian. And Aristotle mentioned that you need to grow. Remember that when I was young, when I was homeless, I didn't know how to speak the English language properly, probably the way you do. I need to go to the public libraries and ask for help from the librarians to give me access to books because I don't have the means. I was in the periphery of the society. But I was able to do it. The very reason why I'm speaking in front of you, because I did it on my own. Of course, with the help of other people during my journey. And I'm very thankful with them. And the other thing is, at this point in time, you say I'm very bad at research. Dr. Mo knows about it. Very bad at research. My strength is teaching in the classroom. Okay? But I'm struggling with research, but I need to do it. Because that is part and parcel of being a teacher. I didn't know how to decide. It was only years ago that I asked myself, how do I engage my students? So I started watching YouTube videos on my own. I started watching the great speakers. Do you really think that my hands move just because, the movement of my hands come naturally to me? Of course not. I need to study hand movement to convey what I'm saying effectively. Do you really think that my tonal pattern comes naturally to me? Of course not. I studied them. Designing, I studied them. What's the color combination? How do you design? How do you make sure that this image comes from this side to the other side using PowerPoint presentation? It takes time. But the thing about us professors is that generally we have a set of subjects that we teach. If you do it in the beginning, take time, it will be repeated again next semester. You just have to enhance it if there's no information to that particular topic of yours. See, I am a living example that I was able to do it. Despite of nothingness, you'll be able to do it.
I think we have another question. Yes?
Hi. So,
Where are you? Sorry. I love your caller.
that was very interesting. There's actually a lot of AI out there at the moment that work as design assistants. For example, Tome, which you can get a free account as an educator, and it can help with tutorials and presentations, and it integrates with DALI, etc. So my question to you is, have you experimented with these different AI platforms, and do you have particular ones that you would recommend for those of us who are not, let's say, so design savvy and would like that additional help?
Yes, I've experimented with DALI, okay, as you mentioned. I have an account, experimented with ChatGPT since it came out in October, November. I'm very familiar with its strength and its weaknesses. I'm very familiar with because I'm a techie person, but self-taught. Okay? And I'm not afraid to spend if it will make me grow. The industry uses, despite probably your dislike, 71%, based on the survey from Forbes magazine in 2017, 71% in the industry uses PowerPoint presentation. Okay? And the reason why it's still PowerPoint presentation in the classroom, because as I mentioned earlier, there should be continuity between the academy and the industry. If PowerPoint presentation is the most used tool in the industry in terms of presentation, you can use DALI for images, for example, but I also have, for example, FreePic, okay, one of the websites for my images, Canva for my images. I only use Canva precisely because I want the images, not because of the design. I want to design my own slides because I want it to be modified according to the needs of the students or the context of my lecture. Okay? But I understand, okay? I have all those accounts, and I pay. Okay, I pay precisely because I'm a teacher. I need to have a design that's fantastic and engaging for the students. See? And I hope I answer your question, but that's basically that. I focus on PowerPoint presentation because this is the standard tool currently for presentations, since my topic is presentation, in the industry. All the others are supplements. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it on? Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. In my role as an academic educator, so I see a lot of presentations developed by faculty. And I think the main issue there is that there is a confusion between the material that I want to share with my students as a resource and the presentation. So there's a huge difference. If I want to share resources with the students, I can put all the text that I want and just put it on Blackboard or whatever learning management system faculty are using. But presentations are meant for slideshow, for presentation, for conveying key messages, but not as a study resource. Another point is the PowerPoint, the Office 365. It has the
Yes.
slides integrated already, which is, it has it's called the designer. So when you start designing your slide, it will give you some suggestions for some animation or some color combination. It also has the coach presenter, so if you try, give it a go, it will help you to present for your students, so it will as a coach for you to help you in presenting.
Fantastic, that is correct. Microsoft 365, the most powerful version of Microsoft, okay, and Keynote as well. I utilize Keynote for my presentation. And as you mentioned something about which I forgot now. What was it, the very first one that you mentioned? Yeah, the presentation resources. This is usually accompanied by notes. So I present to the students, and then at the end of the class, I distribute notes of the presentation. I do that. Okay. Because again, it's about modeling. They need to know how to properly present, and I need to model that. And this is, for me, the best way to do it. Brief words, few words, present without even looking at the slides. Okay, be familiar with your topic. And of course, the notes later on for them to study, because there's still a lecture, then will be distributed to them. Thank you very much.
Okay, we only have one last question from you. Okay.
My question is simple. We have, based on the subject, the presentation will change, right? Some topics is related to technology, and we are taking a print screen of a technology, right? When we use Microsoft Design or Canva, it doesn't fit into that. So your presentation cannot be as what you have shown, the visual.
When I mentioned that I'm making my own presentation, it's precisely for that reason. A slide is a blank slate, and I put together text and images. And I get my images from FreePic, from Canva, and many other resources, but I put them together to make sure that that particular slide, all slides are aligned to the topic of the day. Okay.
Yeah, when you use
I'm
the
not
design,
dependent.
yeah, it doesn't automatically pulls those images because it fixes with the text and image that what we put. So some images are distorted.
Yeah, I don't like it
we
because it
find very
limits.
difficult.
I don't like it because it limits my creativity.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My stomach is grumbling. Your stomachs are grumbling. So thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Rex. Okay.